I'm going to begin this podcast with a riddle. What's available 365 days a year with 20,000 visitors, serves 20 communities, including an outlay of 18,000 eggs, 16,000 pounds of produce, 1,600 pounds of meat, offers hands-on education, is organic, has been around for 46 years, and used to be known as the Red Wing Farm Project? The answer will be revealed in a moment. I know the suspense is palpable. It's a cliffhanger, and I promise I won't make you wait too long. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, a podcast featuring interviews with nonprofit and social impact organizations under $10 million. My name is Laura Witkoff, and I'm excited and proud to be your host. My hope is that you love the stories as much as we do, and perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, or donate. Feel free to pass along any valuable information you hear today to others, and remember to send me the name of any organization you'd like featured at reachus@theintrinsicgroup.com. Now, for the answer. Drum roll, please, or perhaps our fabulous theme music. And the answer to the opening riddle is the Natick Community Organic Farm, located in Natick, Massachusetts. The Natick Community Organic Farm is a nonprofit certified organic farm providing productive open space, farm products, and hands-on education for all ages. And it's year-round and has been since 1975. Originally known as the Red Wing Farm Project, with the mission of supplying much-needed summer jobs to local young people at risk, the project became known within a few years of its start as the Natick Community Organic Farm and has expanded its mission to include environmental and educational components. One of their mottos, which I love, is open from sunup to sundown every day of the year with no admission fee. They have several wonderful YouTube videos both on their history and present day, and we'll make sure we post the links in our blog about them. I am so delighted to introduce two guests today. Casey Townsend, Executive Director and Farmer, and Small and Gutsy's very own co-producer, sound engineer, and composer, Pavel Franson, who spent time volunteering at the Natick Community Organic Farm. So let's get started. Welcome, Casey and Pavel, and I'd love for you to start by sharing your passion about the Natick Community Organic Farm.
Hi, Laura. Thanks so much for having us. It's a great opportunity to reconnect with Pavel, but also to talk about the farm as well. There's so many things to talk about. You gave a great introduction. Where do you want me to begin?
It's a great question. I mentioned that you're also a farmer, so maybe start about your passion around farming and then lead into sort of what brought you to the Natick Community Organic Farm and what makes that a passion of yours, because you're obviously, you've been dedicating your career, your life there at this point.
Yeah, I'll take you back about 20 years. During my undergrad days, I was more geared towards an environmental science background, and strangely enough, what I thought was going to be my first job was going to be in landfill management, doing things, dealing with garbage. And I think it was in my junior year at Penn State, I quickly realized there was this disconnect between the science and what people's perception was going on. And so I was very fortunate to work at an environmental ed center that's closely associated with Penn State called Shavers Creek Environmental Center. It's partially funded through Penn State. And they really bridged that gap for me between the science and the education and teaching kids. And it was that connection that I really found that it was important. So it was teaching science in a way that was very approachable. That's kind of what's been driving me all these years. I did a little bit of traveling abroad for a couple of years and came to the Boston area. And I started my agricultural days at a farm called Landsake, which is in Weston.
I know
it's a really great farm. It started about the same time as Natick Community Organic Farm. The mission's a little bit different than what we do. Ultimately, what I found at Landsake, I was working through their Green Power program, which was a program that was getting kids engaged in agriculture. That was the aha moment for me. It was like, wow, we can do this physical work. We can teach these kids how to get dirty, and we can teach them about science at the same exact time. Kind of bopped around a little bit in between Landsake and worked at a production farm. I worked for the trustees of the reservation. I did some rooftop gardening for them, worked with some folks in Dorchester. And ultimately, this farm, Natick Community Organic Farm, was always on my radar. Linda, who I'll mention a lot in this podcast, was the founder of the farm, and she started it around 1980. And she's just is an amazing human being, a force to be reckoned with in so many great ways. And then a position opened up there as the assistant director and I took it in 2013. And then when Linda retired, I ultimately moved up to the executive director position. And what really drives me in terms of right now is just that passion that comes with working with kids. So we work with a lot of different kids. A bulk of what I do that keeps that farm running is we have a really amazing program for teenagers called this apprenticeship program. And it's a program that's designed for 2 years for 6 to 7 kids. And we commit to them and they commit to us. And we teach them everything about small-scale agriculture, from animal husbandry to maple syrup to flour production. And it goes all the way up. They're the rock star kids of our farm. They run chainsaws, they drive tractors, weed whackers, anything that you think a kid probably can't do, they can do. And
what
so
a great
that's just
experience.
like one example of why I love my job so much, is the kids just have this energy that I think as adults we fail or we lose in a way. But they just come with a breath of fresh air every single time, every day when I see them.
It's beautiful. You know, it's so interesting because in reading a bit about the history of the original project, it was really for, jobs for youth, right, originally. Mm-hmm. And then Linda must have come in and said, wait, we can expand this to really make it a full-fledged educational program for many ages and also serve the community in a new way. So it really moved from the project concept to a hearty organization that it is today, which is really remarkable.
It's super amazing. Yeah. I mean, when Linda started in 1980, the funny thing is that she built that farm from a single barn that was there. I mean, as you can read on our website, you'll see that farm has been continuously farmed for about 200 years. At one point, it was the largest flower farm in the Metro West. But when Linda took over as the ED in 1980, there was a barn there. That was it. The second stall of the barn was her office. That's where she started. She dug her own latrine. And from that, she built the farmhouse, greenhouse. She built the other greenhouse. She built all the animal enclosures. And it started out as an opportunity to get kids involved. And so the technology wasn't even there, in terms of cell phones and the internet. So she talked often about the job board. And she would post a job for the kids, and they would look at it, and she would drive down to the school, scoop them all up, and bring them down and engage them in whatever was going on that day. And that's the value of what we do. So we don't fake anything at the farm. On a day when someone shows up, if we have to clean out the turkey house, that's what we do. We tell them why. Why is one of the most important things we talk about. Why are we doing this? Because kids and volunteers and adults and anybody who comes are really good at seeing through jobs if you're just making up busy work. But we integrate rather than segregate. And that's different from a lot of other farms. So whatever's going on that day, you're going to help out with. We make it really fun. As Pavel can attest to, I talk about really ridiculous things sometimes to make the time go by. And that's what it's all about. It's about having fun, learning about workmanship, how to work really hard. It's a great combination of things to be able to do. I think the kids who come and the adults are really thoughtful and cognizant of the fact that we're not just making something up.
I love, I want to just capitalize on, you've said so many things, but the idea of integration. And the reason why I love that word is because then the kids and youth who leave, it becomes integrated into their soul and in how they probably have a lens on the world in their own lives, whatever profession they end up doing, so that they understand the importance of recycling or the importance of organic or the importance of agriculture in general, so on and so forth. I'm going to shift it for a second because, Pavel, you were a volunteer. And I'd love to hear your experience and then go back to Casey and hear more about some of the variety of programs that you offer. What was it like being a volunteer there?
It was super cool. And in all the ways that Casey just mentioned, and just having a really fun time, but also having a perspective on agriculture and on food and how all of that works, but also how all of it sort of ties into the rest of our lives. What ended up happening was I was in my last year of high school, and in the spring there was sort of a capstone project where part of it they wanted us to go get out and do something cool, and I knew I wanted to be outside, and this seems very, very cool. So when I saw the flyer, I ended up reaching out, and I remember I came out and wore like a button-down shirt because everybody kept telling me, well, this is an interview, so you should wear a button-down shirt. And so I remember looking a little bit ridiculous when I showed up there, but then everybody was super, super nice. I ended up working, I think it was either once a week or twice a week for that entire spring. And then when school ended, I remember I just wanted to keep showing up. And so once or twice a week for that summer, I was just there and helping out. And it was super cool. You never knew what you were going to be doing that day. Some days it would be what I would think of as farm stuff, where we were in the greenhouse, we'd be doing stuff to the fields, doing something with the animals. But other days it'd just be building a fence, or, I did a ton of flower arranging, which was great because that was the only room with any kind of AC, the basement. So I did a lot of flower arranging. But yeah, it was awesome because apart from just being outside and meeting a bunch of really cool people, it was great seeing sort of what food is other than the thing on your plate. And I mean, the other day for the podcast, we were talking to some folks who were sort of talking about upscaling and reducing food waste. And part of that was the kind of visually unappealing, quote unquote, food that would normally not be at a grocery store is like still usable food. And I flash back to my days at Natick Community Organic Farm, because when we would have food, when we would have those sort of potluck style lunches, people would bring in food, people would cook food, but we would also be eating that sort of slightly bruised or slightly blemished food. And I, for the first time in my life, realized, yeah, there's nothing wrong with any of these, carrots. It's just that I wouldn't find them at a grocery store. So that that kind of widening lens was absolutely invaluable.
What a great testament to the fact that you carried on your volunteerism even post your capstone, because it really speaks to what Casey said before, which is the integration of the learning. And I love the concept of showing up and not knowing kind of what needs to be done that day, because that's real life. That's real farming. You have a certain plan, but then something can come up. Thank you, Pavel. That was great. Casey, share with us some of the variety of programs that you offer. You've mentioned some, and how you serve the community as well.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things we always keep in mind. We are a very unique nonprofit town partnership. We actually don't own the land that we farm on. So the land itself is owned by the Conservation Commission for the town of Natick, and we have a lease to steward that land. You mentioned some of the communities that we work with. Our goal is to really meet the needs for whatever the community is asking for. For example, COVID this year really put things in a really interesting spin. So early on in the season, people were looking for home gardening. So we shifted and pivoted to provide seedlings. And then we bulked up our CSA. People were looking for more food stability and food resilience.
Community-supported agriculture, or CSA model, also known as crop sharing, is a system that connects the producer and consumers by allowing the consumer to subscribe to the harvest of a certain farm or group of farms. The model is actually a subcategory of civic agriculture that has an overarching goal of strengthening a sense of community through local markets.
Once people started seeking out opportunities to do education work outside, we then were able to offer programming. So kids were actually able to do it outside, and we were able to provide it in a safe manner. Ultimately, we exist to serve the town of Natick and the surrounding communities in whatever capacity that is. When Linda started, it was about, providing jobs for kids. Most recently in this past year, it shifted again to, seedlings and programming. And that's one of the benefits, I think, as a small nonprofit, is we can pivot. We grew more food, we grew more flowers, we grew more meat this year. We pivoted because that's what the community really wanted.
Well, and it sounds like you provided education for folks who wanted to do their own gardening. So it was also, education and opportunity for them to then be able to have an activity at home with their kids, or actually be sustainable.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things, I know COVID is still very much on our mind this year. We stayed open. Our door never shut. And we said, we're going to remain open. We're going to have some restrictions in terms of this building may be closed. Please don't touch the gates here. Keep socially distant from our staff. We stayed open, and I think people really needed that open space. They needed to get out of their houses. They needed to just see something. It's interesting from my own personal perspective. Like, there was a great deal of normalcy that exists for me. It was just, we were still doing the same thing. We just amped it up a little bit more. I still went to work every single day. We still grew food. Someone asked me really early on, I think it was in March when COVID was really starting to go, they said, what are you going to do? You're just going to pack up? And I said, no, we're not going to pack up. We're going to do what we do, because that's just what we do. We're here for it. We're not going to shut our doors. So the bigger picture is we pivot to whatever the community needs. But within that, though, we definitely have seasons and then programs, and we integrate people into that. So I think of our year in terms of a couple main seasons, and it should start in February, but maple season is our early season, and then we go into our birthing season and our seedling season. So those things that's the biggest juggling act. And so we're trying to figure out how we can go collect all the sap and tap the trees and make sure the pig needs to get inside so that they have a place to birth and the seedlings don't die from lack of water. That's our juggling season. That's our biggest season. And then that bleeds kind of into our production season. So our flowers, our vegetables. We do humanely raise meat as well. And during that summer is one of our biggest seasons as well. We have our summer program season where we integrate all of our programs, and I'll touch about those in a second. And then we kind of start going into the fall. It's kind of our harvest appreciation time. And then we do a lot of turkeys as well. So the end of the turkey season is the end of our season. That's the time when we can shift down a little bit in the second gear, catch our breath, say, whew, okay, we did it.
And you did, even with COVID. Pretty impressive, I have to say. But that gives us sort of your cycle as you walked us through that. So you're about to be gearing up, it sounds like.
Correct. Yeah, we're gearing up. We're getting all of our stuff ready for our seedling season. Our soil arrived, our trays arrived. We're ordering our seeds. We're calling all our maple landowners right now to get permission for tapping. Our first pig, I think, is set to birth in February. And then so that's kind of like the big picture of the breadth of our season. And then within that, we have educational programs. And Linda would always say that education is our greatest product, our best product. And she had this line that no one would ever come to look at carrots, but they would come to feed the bunnies or something like that. So we have programs related to animal care. So we have families that come in the morning to help with our animal chores. The kids always love the rabbits and the chickens. And so we integrate them as much as possible. During our summer season, we have a big, robust program. It's the busiest time of the year. And we have programs that start about for 3-year-olds. And so we just match the age group to whatever task they can do. One of our big mantras is there's a job for everybody if they show up to the farm, regardless of your skill, regardless of your background. So the 3-year-olds are great at collecting eggs and washing eggs. So that's the starting point, right? And then as they go up from there, like our older kids that have cycled through our programs and that we consider our rock stars, who are our apprentices or our part-time high school kids, we just keep giving them more responsibility and they rise to the challenge. And so it's just a stepping stone of how we can integrate them further and further. So our summer program kids I work with most closely, I don't necessarily have a summer crew. Like other farms have adults that they work with, they do all the harvesting. In a normal year, my summer crew is middle school students. They help do all the maintenance, all the harvesting for the CSA, everything. It's all them. And we integrate them into whatever's going on.
I would love to talk to a few of the parents of those kids, wondering if they're doing chores at home as a result of what you're providing. Honestly, because sorry to interrupt you. Do the kids who really stay in the program, if some of them really went into the field of agriculture or sustainability based on the work that they did with you over the years?
Yes. My goal is not, let's just say like if we have 100 kids, my goal is to not produce 100 farmers, right? The goal is really to produce people who are good stewards of the earth, who are good citizens, who are thoughtful, who care about other people, who think about community. Like I have a kid right now who's been with me since he was 12, and he's actually going to be going off hopefully to Dartmouth, and he's a genius, right? I would never guess that he would be a farmer. He probably won't be a farmer. But I would say that yes, we do track the kids who are amazing rock stars who go through our apprenticeship program. Usually what happens is we hire them on as part-time employees until they graduate. A couple of kids have gone, Georgia is in vet school right now. So that was a direct consequence of her working with the animals. We have another kid who, no matter what I could break, he could fix. So he went to Vermont Tech to study diesel mechanics. He's using the skills that he acquired at the farm. Landstake Farm, which I mentioned most recently, has just taken over by an NCOF alum. So Brendan, who went through all of our programs, is now the newest farm manager at Landstake.
But it speaks to the work ethic too. Like you talked about this young, individual who's going off to Dartmouth. He may not be a farmer, and of course that you don't expect that, but their work ethic, it translates into other areas of their life. It's just a wonderful, gift that you're giving as part of that educational frame.
And I think one of the biggest gifts that we give is this sense of who's your community and how can you contribute to that community, whether it's the Natick community or the community, for example, if he goes to Dartmouth, how can he give back? We talk a little bit about like the individual is important here and what you can learn, but what is your impact in terms of this particular action? How does it translate to your work crew? How does it translate to the town of Natick? So as we start to think about these small little actions and how they can cause big ripples, essentially.
So you started to talk about the middle schoolers as your summer crew, and I sort of deviated a little bit, but it was super interesting. I didn't know if you wanted to add on to that.
Yeah, so the middle school program, there's this transition that happens from the younger kids when they're like 3 years old. Like it's not necessarily production heavy, right? It's more so let's get the kids really having fun at the farm. The junior working farmers are doing jobs that are related to our production, like picking beans, things that are super simple that they can actually feel successful on, kind of your more tedious jobs, right? Like picking beans or picking blueberries, things like that are very, very simple. And then when they graduate into the working farmer program, it's everything. You know, we have a pick list for a CSA Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They pick lettuce, they pick eggplant, peppers, whatever. So it's multiple tasks and multiple things they have to actually do. And then from that, we can recognize Pat was a rock star. Let's get him involved in the apprenticeship program. And then we commit to them for 2 years. And then from that, we can say, okay, you've been great. Let's have you hang on for 2 more years and let's see what you can do until you graduate. One thing I always think about is that adults don't give kids enough credit for what they can do. There's a kid who went through our farm, James. When he was at the farm, he could do amazing things more so than I could do. He could actually run a chainsaw better than I could do. And now he's off at the University of Montana doing forestry, right? So that's just like an amazing thing. He has very good common sense, good community spirit, good community sense, but the skill levels are off the charts. I remember telling someone one time, yeah, our high school students run a tractor. They go, what? A tractor? I was like, yeah, it's a tractor. And they don't have that concept that if you give them the space and you do it in a very thoughtful way and you give them small, lower risk jobs and you build it up to more and more complexity, they're able to withstand that and they succeed and do it really well.
It sounds like they rise to the occasion when you create the building blocks, which it sounds like your program really does from age 3 all the way through, which is remarkable. And I want our listeners to recognize that this program is incredible in the way of building both self-esteem, skill set. And I have another area to ask about is since they're working on a crew together when they get to a certain age, although even though that starts at 3 with collecting eggs and washing them, which I love it, is I would imagine there's a level of teamwork or something that you foster that allows them to also create relationships with each other.
Yeah, I would like to take credit for that, but it's just more, no pun intended, it's a more organic process that actually happens. So a lot of times what happens is we will see the kids coming through the working farmer program, for example, that are friends. And because they're friends, they have some of the same characteristics. And so those kids tend to kind of group themselves together. As someone once pointed out, like farming attracts a certain set of people who are self-selecting. So they're not necessarily kids that'll fall into other groups, like your stereotypical high school groups, right? We've had some really amazing cohorts of kids in the apprenticeship program, for example, and now they're just amazing friends. We try to foster it through fun activities and increase responsibility and having them work together, but kids are amazing in the sense that they can be friends with anybody. And I think we lose that as adults. Like you can put 3 kids together and they're instantly friends within a week. It just happens. It's just the nature of who they are and their age.
Especially if they have a common purpose, or a mission, which is what you've actually given them. Even though you mentioned that it's organic, it's an expectation that the focus is an appreciation for the land and education and learning and building blocks. But when you're doing that together, you have a common purpose and reason to be able to interact effectively. I'm actually, at the end of this month, I'm teaching a class on team building, and I think I'm going to use your farm as an example. Because even though you know, in an organization, people come together because the mission of the organization speaks to them, or it's a job that they want. So there is that common mission, but it gets lost, as you mentioned, you know, in adulthood, it becomes more individualistic. And you're creating that level of community that needs to start at a younger age. and it really is fostered. So I do give you credit for that, even if it's organic.
Yeah, Casey, I would love to give you that credit because I think you are a part of what's fostering the community environment and sort of the welcoming, positive like camaraderie. There were plenty of times where it could have been cold or rainy or miserable, but you'd take out me and a couple of other people, and by the end of it, everybody would always be having fun because you would have something interesting to talk about or some interesting way of going about it. And that lasted the entire time that I was there. And I'm sure that the people there now, part of why they come is because of that community. I mean, it's in the name.
Yeah, yes, it is. Well said. Yeah, so true. So I know you've said so much, but is there something particularly personal or special about Natick Community Organic Farm that you want to share?
There's so many things, and we have just stats upon stats of things that make this farm special. We continue to be a place that's welcoming for anybody. We're open, as you said, sun up to sundown, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We're a pretty welcoming crew. We like to engage with people, and I think that it's a very special thing that Linda created and that I've been able just to continue. We are very special in the sense that, as far as I know, there are very few town-owned farms across the country. It's definitely under 5 town-owned farms. And I think that that's something that, when Linda set this up in 1980, it was one of the first community farms. And that just blows my mind that more communities don't have farms. If we're talking about sustainability, one of the biggest aspects of sustainability is food production, how your food is grown and where it's grown and how you can connect with that. Linda, from the model that she set up, caused this effect of other communities in our area. Newton Community Farm now has a farm. Medway has a farm. And so those aren't necessarily town-owned farms, but they're community farms. And I think one of the biggest things that towns across the country can do, especially as they talk about sustainability, is how can we talk about where your food's grown and does the town support food production and also include education in that as well. There's so many teachable moments that we have throughout the day when a family comes up and says, what is that? What are we looking at? And we have to talk a little bit about that, so we have to say, well, this is what you're seeing right now. You have to teach the staff to be able to say, okay, we have a production angle, but we also need to teach people about what we're doing. And so Linda would always say, people have a keen eye for when they walk around the farm and they see what's missing or what's not there. And so you're farming in the public eye. And that's a really special thing. That means you have to really take care of your animals, your fields. You want them to look good. You want to be a place that the community respects and feels proud about. Natick Community Farm is really special in that sense, that Linda set it up, and it's been amazing to see other communities pick that up. I think that more communities need to have farms, town-owned farms.
You raise a level of awareness that isn't there before. And you also, I think, with a community farm, create a level of buy-in because it's owned by the community. So the respect and pride that one takes in participating or maybe coming and purchasing products becomes an investment from the community. And so the level of pride, awareness, and ownership is a collective aspect of this. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and we're really lucky to be blessed by a community that has supported us for so long. We continue to integrate further with the town of Natick. This year, for example, you asked at the beginning of the podcast, why do we exist? And part of that is to meet the needs of the town. And so this year, in response to COVID, we were able to provide senior shares for our CSA program. We were also able to, through the work of the Community Services Department, to help deliver them. So the seniors didn't have to leave their house and they were still able to receive that food. And this year in 2021, we'll be doing work with the Natick Housing Authority, providing food for people who need it. Especially, we think of the Metro West area as a more affluent part of the world, but there's still folks that need access to food. Part of our CSA program this year coming up is helping folks who can't necessarily afford that food. So we'll be doing that in addition to our senior shares, in addition to our normal shares. And so I think that we're excited about that and giving the community something that they really need, in addition to the education and the maple syrup and the meat and all that other good stuff.
So the community service aspect is really important, both to the farm and to the community. And it becomes really, a way of engaging the community and providing services in a collaborative, interdependent kind of way, which drives another question for me, which is, It sounds like during COVID, volunteers still stepped in and participated with masks and being very careful. And as you're gearing up for this season where you really have to be in high gear, and do you anticipate that you will have enough volunteers?
In the past, we were in a normal non-COVID year, we would receive volunteers or corporate groups or anybody any day of the week. During COVID, we really had to structure it, and we continue to structure it so that we can receive and work with volunteers on certain days. Specifically, Tuesday is the day we work with volunteers. The crux of that is that we want to keep both the staff healthy and safe, as well as the volunteers who are coming to work as well. So obviously everyone's wearing masks. We only do outside work. We do have a place for volunteers moving forward. It's less than what we would hope for, but we're doing it the best way that we can, trying to keep everybody safe. And that's a tricky balance to try to work through.
I think your answer is beautiful. And it's because you have to follow protocols. You have the responsibility to keep people safe. You don't want to close your doors to volunteers, so there's a way to do it. People are working at home, so you don't have those groups to count on. And you've got a huge workload. So kudos to you, your staff, the volunteers you are able to have participate. And I think it's remarkably positive and forward thinking. As somebody asked you almost a year ago in March, are you just going to shut down? You're like, absolutely not. And you haven't. What I gather is also the culture of the organization. As Pavel said, too, it's the culture of how people welcome in. People, as he came in with a button down, and it was like, wait, you're going to be doing farm work. I love that story. It's terrific.
I didn't think I was going to be doing farm work that day.
Hey, you were there. You're going to roll up your sleeves. So now I have always a round of quick, gutsy questions. So what is at the top of your wish list, but the answer cannot be money or funding?
That's a good question. Actually, money or funding wouldn't be at the top of our wish list. When Linda set it was set up as a diversified income stream. So we don't rely heavily on grants. We exist through the sale of our products, whether that is maple or flowers or our educational programming. So we always think of it in terms of like the three legs of what the stool that we sit on in terms of our events, our education, and our production. And that relates directly back to our resilience and how we did this year.
So what would be the top of your wish list?
At this very moment, I would say it would be increased community engagement. I mean, this farm is such a special place, and we have so many people come, and I also the staff did an amazing job this year. They were incredibly resilient in terms of wearing masks all summer in hot, humid conditions, being safe. But the community itself really responded well, and I'm really lucky to live in a state where people are responding to the protocols and doing it well and doing it safely. And this community stepped up this year in terms of what they were able to give us and purchase from us and attend the farm and be brave about coming out into that open space. And I know that the farm itself makes a lot of people happy. And I look forward to the day. This is a really simple thing that we can engage more people, but also just see that engagement on their face, because the mask itself is just such a physical barrier to happiness. If I could, I would just be able to see people's smiles, because I know that the farm makes so many people so happy. We had a really great book series earlier in the year with one of our TerraCore members, Zach, who was reading, and goats were jumping on him as he was reading the book. And that's just like a really nice way that people engage with the farm who couldn't come to the farm. But I think that increased engagement is something that we continuously look for. And how can we have more people appreciate the space that is theirs, essentially, if they're town of Natick residents?
Yeah, beautifully said. And also, I think we collectively, as a society, have to learn in the interim to use our eyes while we're wearing masks as a way to, communicate our happiness or our concern or our whatever it is. So, but it's hard because we're used to having that engagement. I know as a teacher, as a professor, it's a challenge to be doing so much on Zoom. So I love that answer. So if you were to think of a song that describes Natick Community Organic Farm, what would it be?
Oh man, a song. That's a good question. I mean, there are certain songs we sing as like a staff, but they don't necessarily like relate to anything that's going on. We're a pretty goofy crew. That's the best question I've heard in a long time. Let me get back to you on that one.
That's fine. You can. And it could be one of the goofy songs you guys sing as a staff. It'll, whatever it is, it is. But that may be, if you heard a song, a goofy song in another setting, that might remind you of your organization because it's one that you all maybe sing.
I do want to say every single song that was on the radio at the time that I was volunteering in my head is a Natick Community Organic Farm song, just because we'd be in the field. And I think it might have been James, honestly, who would always pop up and sing a line or two lines from the song in between, 20 minutes of like weeding or something to do with kohlrabi. And so for me, those are songs that are burning my head.
Yeah, which song was it? James?
He was really into Two Phones by Kevin Gates, but he would he would say, I've got 2 shovels or I've got 2 garlics. Yeah, basically. So is that. But the song has nothing to do with the farm in and of itself.
I love that you mentioned kohlrabi, Pavel, I have to say, because I grew up on kohlrabi. And when I grew up in the 70s, my mother's European. And so we had kohlrabi on a regular basis. Most people didn't even know what it was. It's a root, by the way.
Well, Casey knows.
Yeah, of course, Casey knows.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe our listeners may not know what it is. Although it's become more in vogue, like Brussels sprouts used to be boiled to death. And now there's 50 different ways to have a fabulous meal of Brussels sprouts.
I would say I can answer your question in 2 ways, actually. It's not necessarily a song, but it's a collection of songs. In a normal year, we spend a lot of time in the greenhouse seeding things, and it's really fun times. I always think about my friend growing up in high school, who I know everybody had this friend who you always ended up going to their house, and everybody ended up going to that person's house, right? That's how I think about the greenhouse specifically, because that's usually the time when we're all in close quarters and there's a radio in the background. And I can't necessarily think of any particular song, but it's the collection of songs, whatever's going on and popular at that time, that really bring us all together. And it's chit chat, it's really ridiculous questions, it's music that's in the background, it's whatever pop music is on, or I usually force them to try to listen to country music, and that goes over like a lead weight. And it's not any one particular song, but it's the music that's there, and it's that atmosphere of everybody being together. And it's for me, it's at my friend Kyle's house, who we were always at, always having fun. And I try to replicate that so that people don't necessarily feel like it's work. They feel like it's some activity where they're at their friend's house, something like that.
Music really does that for us, doesn't it? And then we hear that song in another context, and it reminds us of, as Pavel said, it'll always remind him of working on the farm. What makes your organization particularly gutsy? And I think you've answered some of that, but what comes to mind when I say you are a gutsy organization?
Yeah, I can answer it in kind of 2 ways, like the mental aspect and then the physical aspect. So the mental aspect is that we have a staff that will pivot. And I know on a lot of nonprofits, they always talk about wearing multiple hats. And our organization is that to a T. And that was demonstrated this year during COVID, when our educational programming went down. Our staff pivoted to become production staff. They just moved over. That's what we did. And everybody helps out, whether it's in the fields or doing a program. We are pretty amazing in the sense that I could take one of my farm production staff members and say, oh, this educator didn't show up today. Can you go lead this rabbit program? Okay, they can go do it. I talk a lot about this with the kids that I work with, that there's value being a generalist in a way that you can do a lot of different things. And I know that the world really wants us to specialize. Being a generalist and being able to fix a machine and then go help a pig birth, those are pretty amazing things. Gutsy, from a physical standpoint, is that we do some pretty disgusting jobs. Linda would always say, I would never ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. And I kind of keep that in my brain, is that one thing that I really like to do is I like to work with the people. Instead of saying, go out there and do that work, like, let's go do it together. Let's experience it. And there's some physically gutsy jobs that we do. Cleaning out the turkey house is not a very glamorous job, but we do it. We started moving some soil yesterday, and I just realized how dirty you get. And I came home, my wife was like, what happened to you today? And I was like, well, this is just the job, there's a point where my hands get dirty and I don't see them clean again until September or October or November. And there's value in being dirty. There's value in experiencing that and that story that's behind that. We ask people to do a lot of different things, but we never ask them to do it because it's just there. We ask them to do it because we have to do it.
Well, and I love the idea of you actually are serving as a role model And I believe this is true in organizations and in management. You got to roll up your sleeves and be side by side with your employee, both for teaching, education, whatever. And in this case, the youth or students or other volunteers. It really shows that you're part of the entire, and it's a wonderful role model. I love that. What is something that outsiders or even insiders don't know about a Natick Community Organic Farm?
That's a good question. I think that it's been shown a lot this year is just that we exist. People found us and people were just like, wow, there's a farm in the suburbs? They were shocked at first. Like, that's one of the biggest things. And I think that's this misconception that exists that communities in the suburbs can't have farms. That always blows me away. That's something like external when you have a person come from the surrounding community and say, I never knew this existed. And that's a great opportunity for us to say, hey, welcome. This is a farm. This is what we do. This is how you can walk around. This is where you can go. But then there's always these really small teachable moments when someone's looking at our chicken coop and saying, why does that chicken look so strangely? Or why are the feathers different? Or why are these rabbits here? And there's always these nice teachable moments when it's that disconnect that people don't have with farms anymore. It's not a forced teachable moment. It's somewhere someone's actually asking you something. And it's this really nice thing where you can connect with them on a way just through agriculture, right? And so that's the medium with which we're talking to people and connecting. This is an aside, but one of the great things that we do is with our kid groups and our high school groups, we don't allow cell phones at the farm. Like, unless it's an emergency, don't bring your cell phone. And when you force people to talk to each other, you can get some really amazing conversations. I listen to this other podcast, and this other guy always talks about, this disconnect between what's going on at the bigger political level, the national level, and then what he sees on the ground. And what I see on the ground is people actually connecting together. And it's amazing that if you bring a weird group of people together who shouldn't be together, there's so many commonalities that exist there. With everything that we're inundated with now, it's just people lose sight of that. But I see that every single day. And I see it in connections that strangers have with each other, or I have with a stranger.
Right. It's such a great example of texting in person, like be in person and don't text and talk. And we don't do enough of it because it's so easy to hide behind a phone. And there's no reason to hide when you have a shared interest and you want to learn about each other. I love that. I love that answer. If you could get one celebrity or influencer to endorse or talk about Natick Community Organic Farm, who might it be?
You're peeking on something, like tapping into something there, because there's a running joke at the farm that I love pop culture. When I was growing up, my mom loved People magazine. So when I was at her house, I would often just dig into People magazine. And so everyone's always like, what's going on in pop culture, Casey? There's a really great farmer / songwriter, musician, Gregory Isakov, who has his own farm in Colorado. Recently listened to a story with him, and the things he was talking about from a technical ag perspective, he knew a ton of stuff. But then from a musical aspect, he's also has some really great music on as well. As a person, I'm always just kind of amazed by Nick Cage, and we have a running joke about Nick Cage at the farm. He's almost like a farmer in a way that he does every single movie. He's almost like a farmer because he's such a generalist. He can do anything.
Yeah, but I love that connection. So, hopefully maybe he'll, either one of them will listen to the podcast and, give you a shout out, which would be great.
Hopefully. Maybe I can visit one of his 16 Scottish castles at some point in the future.
Right. Maybe you could create a farm there. Do a community farm there. I love it. It's great. So what's the best way for people to reach you or reach Natick Community Organic Farm?
If you're in the community, stop by. There's nothing like the experience of actually coming to the farm and visiting, seeing the specialness that exists. If you're not in the area, or just because of COVID you can't, we have a pretty robust social media. We do a lot of videos about our daily production. We have, as I said, book readings. We're pretty good about interacting with people and talking about what things we have, what things we don't have, what we do. And we have a blog as well, so people can reach out to that. We have a really amazing connection through the TerraCore program. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It's a leg of AmeriCorps, which is specifically focused on land-based ventures. And so we have some really amazing TerraCore folks who are doing some awesome video work and blog work, and they've really been able to beef up our social media interact with people that we haven't been able to in the past. So we've got to give a shout out to them.
I knew of AmeriCorps. I didn't know of TerraCorps. I didn't know it was a subset. So it's great. It's great for me to learn about that. It's wonderful. So I want to thank the Natick Community Organic Farm and particularly my guests, Casey and Pavel, for sharing their passion. Any last comments?
Pavel, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. I guess I wanted to say again how cool of a place it is, how awesome of an experience it is to have been part of it. I think, from the ground up, it's literally giving food and sustenance to people who need it. It's adding to the community aspect of the town that it's in. I think it's obviously affecting the people who go on to be in agriculture, like, Georgia and James, you mentioned, but even someone like me who, I sit indoors next to a computer all day now. But I was definitely thinking of Natick at the beginning of COVID, trying to keep myself sane with my little windowsill garden. And I was absolutely thinking of you guys when I realized that I lived in California and I was watering these cherry tomatoes all day, every day, and how bad that was. And now I've basically just got succulents and cacti, and that's amazing because now I have infinite succulents to give away because they're always going to be multiplying. So if anybody is affected by it sort of the same way that I was, or less or more, I think that that's great. And I think that it's just like a really cool thing to exist.
Casey, any last comments or thoughts?
Yeah, mine would be that this model is not exclusive to Natick. I mean, this is a replicable model. Natick is a community, and the community that exists there is specific to us and how we have fun and the things we talk about and how we work and the methods that we grow food. But any community can really take this model and do something with it. It's something that anybody can really do. And I think that more communities should be doing this kind of work. It's simple. It's simple and complex at the same time. But I think that, we just wish it was on other places and more locales.
The outcomes are so outweigh the effort to put in. That's what it sounds like to me. It's really remarkable. Thank you both so very much. This has been really fun, and I appreciate the fun you had with me today to learn about it and hopefully spread the word.
Yeah, thanks so much, you guys, for reaching out. It's really amazing. Thanks for thinking of us, Pavel.
Yeah, no, of course.
We still talk about you fondly at the farm.
Yeah, I'm just glad the first thought is not the time that I got stuck on that rabbit hutch. There's just like a tiny, tiny nail, and I got stuck on it. And I remember Georgia was there, and I was just like,
oh, man.
It's not that this hurts or anything. It's that I didn't expect it, and now I'm woozy. And I just remember her looking at me like, who is this kid?
So I really appreciate this. Thank you very much for spending time with us, Casey and Pavel, for your input. It was really remarkable. Our blog of these small and gutsy nonprofits and small social impact organizations can be found in the organizational stories section of the Intrinsic Group website so that we can continue to link clients, volunteers, future employees, and donors to this small but mighty network. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview. So before you sign on to support or work for them, we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. We just want you to learn about the small and gutsy nonprofit and social impact organizational sector so they can spread their story and their very impactful work. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group staff and volunteers, my co-producer, sound engineer, and composer, and today's guest, Pavel Franson, my graphic designer, Nate Addy. Please check out their bios on the Intrinsic website and all of the folks, friends, and family who've guided and inspired me. And thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, give us some stars, and write a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're interested in sponsoring Small and Gutsy to keep it going, please reach out to me at reachus@theintrinsicgroup.com. I'm Laura, and thanks for listening.